My husband stood up for his mother after she beat me because she found out we were having a girl. My name is Clara, and I'm 26 years old. My husband, Daniel, is 30. We've been married for several years now, and our journey together has been filled with love, challenges, and unexpected turns. Daniel comes from a family with deep-rooted traditions. His parents, Margaret and Philip, had him later in life, viewing him as their last chance to continue the family lineage. Daniel's full name is Daniel James Anderson IV, a name passed down through generations. It's more than just a name, it's a symbol of legacy and pride in his family. An interesting fact about Daniel's family is that no girl has been born on his side for over a century. It's become a running joke among relatives that the Anderson men are incapable of producing daughters. This belief, while humorous to some, carries a weight of expectation. Our wedding in 2017 was a beautiful affair. I had always gotten along well with Margaret, my mother-in-law, up until that point. The ceremony was filled with joy, laughter, and heartfelt speeches. As the night drew to a close and Daniel and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, Margaret pulled me aside. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Now, go give us our Daniel James Anderson V." I laughed nervously, unsure of how to respond. The pressure of continuing the family name was evident. During our honeymoon, amidst the bliss of newlywed life, we conceived our first child. When we discovered I was pregnant, the excitement was palpable. However, when we announced that we were expecting a girl, the reactions were mixed. Many in Daniel's family were in disbelief, some even suggesting we must have made a mistake. As our daughter, Lily, was born, it became clear that she bore a striking resemblance to Daniel. Her features mirrored his so closely that there was no doubt about her parentage. Yet, despite this, subtle comments began to surface. Whenever Daniel wasn't around, Margaret and some other family members would make remarks like, "I wonder where she got that nose, it's definitely not Daniel's." These comments, though seemingly innocuous, began to wear on me. As Lily grew, her resemblance to Daniel became even more pronounced. Still, the comments persisted. I chose not to share these with Daniel, thinking Margaret's health was declining and not wanting to strain their relationship. Margaret's health habits were concerning. She smoked heavily, consumed a diet of processed foods, and refused to drink water, claiming it made her nauseous. Once, after nearly fainting from walking a short distance, I offered her water, only for her to gag and demand a diet soda instead. When we discovered I was pregnant again, I was filled with both joy and apprehension. This time, we were expecting another girl. I pleaded with Daniel not to share the baby's gender with his family immediately. I wanted to savor the early moments of this pregnancy without external pressures. However, Daniel felt it was essential to be transparent with his family. During our next visit, he announced that we were expecting another daughter. The room fell silent. Margaret's eyes welled up with tears, and she began shaking her head, murmuring, "Not another girl." She then turned to me, her voice rising, accusing me of deceiving the family and implying that Daniel couldn't possibly be the father. The atmosphere grew tense. Daniel stood up, defending me and our daughters, insisting that Margaret apologize and refrain from making such accusations. Margaret, through sobs, claimed that our children weren't part of the Anderson lineage. I was overwhelmed with emotion, holding Lily close as she looked around, confused by the commotion. Daniel, visibly upset, declared that we would be leaving and that until Margaret came to her senses, she wouldn't see us again. As we left, he told her, "I love my daughter more than I ever loved you." On our drive home, I shared with Daniel all the subtle comments and insinuations that had been made over the years. He was furious, vowing to protect our family from such negativity. After that painful confrontation, Daniel and I agreed to cut off all contact with his mother, Margaret, and father, Philip. We blocked their numbers and filtered out messages from extended relatives on social media. The silence was refreshing, even healing. Our home felt peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, I could focus on preparing for the arrival of our second daughter without the cloud of anxiety hovering over me. Daniel was incredibly supportive during this time. He took on more responsibilities around the house and with Lily, who was now a lively toddler. He even made jokes about how he couldn't believe he ever wanted a son because Lily had him completely wrapped around her finger. He told me, often, that his love for her was deeper than anything he had imagined, and that having daughters had changed him. I started to believe that we'd moved past Margaret's toxicity. But as my due date neared, I could sense something shifting in Daniel. He grew quieter, spent longer hours in his office, and hesitated when I asked how he was feeling about the impending birth. When I pressed him, he finally admitted he was considering inviting his parents over again. I felt my stomach drop. He said Margaret had been contacting him through his cousin and that she had expressed regret for the things she said. She missed Lily and wanted a chance to apologize. I was hesitant, to say the least. But I also knew Daniel had spent his life trying to gain his mother's approval. I didn't want to be the reason he resented our isolation if he truly believed there was hope for reconciliation. So, with great reluctance, I agreed to let them come over, but under strict conditions. Lily would stay with my sister, and we would meet Margaret and Philip at their home for a dinner and serious conversation. Daniel promised me that if Margaret said even one unkind thing, we would walk away and never look back. The day of the visit arrived. My sister picked up Lily, and Daniel and I made the long drive to his parents' home. The dinner started quietly. Margaret acted polite, even smiled when she greeted us. The food was already on the table, and we sat down, trying to make small talk. There were awkward silences, but no tension yet. After the plates were cleared, Daniel said, "Mom, we need to talk about what happened the last time we were here." Margaret folded her hands in front of her. "Yes, we do. Do you have the results?" Daniel blinked. "What results?" "The paternity test," she said calmly. "I'm not going to apologize until I know for sure. And we both know I'm not wrong." Daniel looked stunned. I froze. "I don't believe you're the father of those girls, Daniel. You've never made girls. None of the men in our family have. It doesn't make sense." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My face flushed with disbelief. I stood up, pushing my chair back, and reached for my purse. Margaret stood quickly. "No, you're not walking away again." She rounded the table and grabbed my sleeve, gripping my arm tightly. "You need to stay and admit what you've done," she said. "You ruined this family and tricked my son." Daniel was shouting now, telling her to let go of me. He rushed to get between us, his voice raised in a way I'd never heard before. But Margaret didn't back down. She suddenly slapped me across the face hard enough to knock my glasses off. I let out a cry and shoved her arm away instinctively. I was almost 9 months pregnant, and the sudden jolt sent pain shooting through my abdomen. Daniel was yelling, trying to pull her back. Philip stood frozen in the doorway, making no move to help. Then, in a fit of rage, Margaret grabbed a snow globe from the nearby shelf and hurled it at me. It hit me squarely in the back of the head. The impact made me stumble to my knees. I felt warm blood trickle down my neck as I clutched my head with one hand and my stomach with the other. What happened next was chaos. Margaret began throwing anything she could reach: books, small ceramic figures, a paperweight. Daniel was shouting, trying to block the objects. I stayed low, trying to protect my stomach, panic seizing my chest. She lunged toward me, trying to kick my side, but she stumbled. Her age and health had caught up to her. As a last resort, Daniel shoved her backward to stop her assault. She fell into the entryway shelf with a loud crash, and Daniel grabbed my arm to help me up. I was crying and terrified, my head spinning, literally and emotionally. She kicked my stomach, I whispered in shock as we fled the house and drove straight to the hospital. At the emergency room, everything became a blur of lights, questions, and medical staff. The doctors treated the wound on my head, which required 6 stitches, and put me under close observation. They monitored the baby's heart rate for hours, concerned about the blunt force trauma to my abdomen. Thankfully, our baby girl showed no signs of distress, though the medical staff said the stress alone could still lead to complications. They urged us to file a police report, especially since I had clear injuries and was in the 3rd trimester. We agreed. Daniel and I both gave statements. When police visited Margaret and Philip's home later that evening, they were told an entirely different story. Margaret claimed Daniel and I had forced our way into their home and attacked her. She had already called an ambulance and was being treated for 2 broken fingers and a strained neck. She insisted it was Daniel who shoved her unprovoked and me who started the confrontation. Daniel was taken in for questioning, briefly arrested, but quickly released after the medical reports and our hospital-initiated police report supported our story. With the truth exposed and Philip reluctantly corroborating parts of it, Margaret was charged with assault. Philip began calling, begging us to drop the charges. "She's old," he said. "No one was really hurt. But I was hurt. My head required stitches. My baby could have been in danger. I had bruises on my arms, a mild concussion, and mounting anxiety. The thing is, even if we wanted to drop the charges, we couldn't. Since the hospital initiated the report, it had to be processed through the court. There was no sweeping it under the rug. And frankly, I didn't want it to be. In the days following Margaret's arrest, the atmosphere at home shifted once again. I was placed on strict bed rest, my movements limited, my thoughts spiraling. Daniel took time off work to care for me and Lily. He doted on us, bringing snacks, rubbing my feet, managing appointments. But under that surface of kindness, I could feel something wasn't right. The night before my scheduled induction, I caught Daniel sitting in the living room, staring blankly at his phone. When I asked what was wrong, he said he had spoken to his father again. "She's not well, Clara," he said quietly. "She can't walk. She's been crying for days. She's in a deep depression." My stomach turned. He went on to say that Margaret's injuries, her fingers, her neck, were worse than he'd realized, and that seeing her so weak and helpless had made him reconsider his anger. "She just wants to meet her granddaughter," he said. "Maybe if we let her see the baby, we can all start to move forward." I sat there, stunned. "Daniel," I said, barely managing to keep my voice steady, "your mother hit me in the face. She kicked me in the stomach while I was pregnant. She threw things at me like I wasn't a human being." "I know," he whispered, "but she's my mom." And that was the line that haunted me. She's my mom. We argued late into the night. I reminded him of the restraining order we had filed, and the temporary no-contact order issued by the court. His response made my blood run cold. "That was issued to you," he said. "Not to me. And it hasn't been finalized yet." He wanted to find a loophole to let her back in. Not because he forgave her, but because he was too afraid to truly let her go. I told him, through tears, that if he brought his mother anywhere near me or the baby, I would leave. And I meant it. But the damage was done. The next morning, he drove me to the hospital for the induction. I didn't speak much. I felt numb. Nurses set me up with IVs, checked my vitals, and began administering medication to induce labor. Daniel sat in the corner, mostly quiet, occasionally glancing at his phone. I didn't ask who he was texting. Hours passed. I labored in silence, flinching each time the contractions intensified. As the baby began to move down and I prepared to push, Daniel stood beside me. I remember holding his hand, if only because I didn't want to be alone in that moment. Then, just as the baby began to crown, Daniel turned to the nurse beside the doctor and asked, "When do we do the paternity test?" I froze. Even through the pain, even as I was seconds from delivering our child, I heard every syllable loud and clear. The nurse stiffened. The doctor looked up from where she was seated between my knees. "Sir," she said, "we are here to deliver a healthy baby and care for the mother. If you have personal matters to resolve, now is not the time." My world collapsed in that instant. I burst into tears, unable to comprehend what had just happened. I begged the staff to understand, stammering explanations. "It's not what it sounds like, it's his baby. His mom put this idea in his head, we were just going to do the test to send it to her." But I could see the shift in their eyes. They weren't judging me, at least not openly, but the trust, the reverence of the birth room, had vanished. When the baby was born minutes later, I held her close, weeping silently. She was perfect. She had Daniel's nose, his chin, and a shock of dark hair just like Lily had. But I couldn't look at him. I felt robbed of the moment, of the joy, of the peace that should have accompanied my daughter's birth. He didn't even ask to hold her. He stepped back and sat down while I was cleaned up. When he finally returned to the room after about an hour, I was feeding our daughter. He pulled out his phone and said, "Mom wants pictures." Before I could stop myself, I slapped the phone out of his hand. It clattered to the floor. He looked at me, wounded, and walked out without a word. He didn't come back that night. My sister picked me up from the hospital 2 days later. Daniel hadn't called. Hadn't texted. My sister drove us home and helped me settle in with the baby. For the next few days, Daniel didn't visit. When he did finally return, he acted like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. He barely looked at the baby. He avoided holding her. Worse, he was cold to Lily. He had been her hero, her best friend, and now he barely spoke to her. When she cried because the television wouldn't load her favorite cartoon, he muttered, "Mommy didn't pay the bill because she's still mad at Grandma." I lost it. I confronted him, told him he had no right to turn his pain into venom and hurl it at a toddler. He argued back that I was punishing everyone by keeping his mother away. I reminded him she had been charged with assault. He told our daughter things like, "You can't come with Daddy because Mommy hates Grandma, and Mommy's mad again, so you have to stay here." It broke something in me. I told him I wanted to separate. I couldn't continue to live with someone who could treat his daughter this way. Who could look at our newborn and see doubt, not love. He begged. He said he didn't need a test for Lily, that he always knew she was his. But I insisted. I wanted it in writing, for court, for protection, for peace of mind. I packed our things. My sister came for us. Lily, the baby, and I moved in with her. And that was the beginning of the end. After I moved in with my sister, the days blurred together. I focused entirely on my daughters, Lily, who was confused but slowly returning to herself, and Nora, our newborn, who had thankfully remained healthy despite everything we had endured. I told Daniel he could visit them whenever he wanted, with one unshakable condition: his mother was never to be near them. Not now, not ever. But he didn't visit. Not once. Instead, he called and texted, not to check on Nora or Lily, but to plead with me to come home. To try again. To stop making a scene. He said I was overreacting, that everyone makes mistakes, and that I was punishing him for loving his mother. The only punishment happening was what he was doing to himself and our daughters. He refused to take the paternity test for Lily. Claimed it was an insult. He insisted it would make him feel like I didn't trust him, as if that wasn't already clear from the moment he asked the nurse in the delivery room about testing Nora. Eventually, I served him divorce papers. He didn't respond at first. He said I was just angry, that once I cooled off, I'd come back. He even went so far as to say, "The day you leave me is the day you become a single mother." He didn't realize how true and liberating those words would become. 3 months passed. He saw the girls once. Once. And only after his father reached out and guilted him into doing so. He brought a toy truck Lily didn't care for and held Nora like she was a borrowed coat. Lily didn't run to him like she used to. She watched him from behind my legs, unsure of what this version of her dad even was. Then, one afternoon, my lawyer called. The divorce was final. It was over. And Daniel never fought it. The silence that followed was both a relief and a grief I can't quite describe. I grieved the man I had married, the father I thought he'd be. But I also began to breathe again. The air felt lighter. My sister helped me furnish a new apartment. Lily and Nora shared a soft pink room with bookshelves and stars on the ceiling. For the first time, we weren't just surviving. We were rebuilding. Then something beautiful happened. I reconnected with someone I had known for years, Julian, a kind and quiet friend from college. We'd been close in school, always managing to miss each other in timing. After I left Daniel, he reached out just to check in. Slowly, gently, we began to talk again. Then walk. Then laugh. Julian met the girls with the sort of grace and tenderness I didn't even know I needed. He learned Lily's bedtime routine. He carried Nora when my arms were tired. He never once questioned their place in his life. We dated for over a year before he proposed. I said yes without hesitation. And soon after, I found out I was pregnant. This time, the experience felt entirely different. There was no pressure. No legacy to protect. No looming family name that demanded fealty. Just joy. Just a growing life with a man who chose us every single day. At 16 weeks, we learned we were having a boy. I didn't tell Daniel. Not right away. I figured he'd see the truth soon enough. But eventually, during one of his rare visits to see Lily, he asked with an air of casual entitlement, "Do you know the gender?" I nodded. Yes. It's a boy. I'm telling you now so you have time to process it however you need to. He was quiet. Not stunned, not angry, just quiet. I could see the weight of that moment settle into his shoulders. He gave a slight nod and walked inside to see the girls. He stayed for exactly 23 minutes. I found out later from a mutual friend that he'd gotten drunk that night and tried to call me. He didn't leave a message. I can only imagine what he wanted to say. But it didn't matter anymore. I had moved on, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed peace. And my daughters needed stability. Daniel's mother had poisoned him with doubt, and instead of protecting us, he had let it fester. He had watched his family unravel and chose silence over support. Distance over defense. A few weeks after the gender reveal, I received a message from him. He said he was cutting ties with his mother, that he had finally seen her for what she was. He'd started therapy and was trying to understand how he had become so blind. He apologized. Genuinely. Said he wished he had stood up for me sooner. That he regretted nearly every decision he made that year. And for what it's worth, I believe him. But it doesn't change the fact that he missed birthdays, milestones, and bedtime stories. That Lily stopped asking why he didn't come around. That Nora, now a toddler, recognizes another man as her father. Julian loves all three of us with his whole heart. He reads to the girls, listens to their stories about dinosaurs and princesses, and tells them he loves them every day. They call him Daddy, because he shows up. Because love, at the end of the day, is a choice you make over and over again. So here we are, a new baby boy on the way. A new chapter. A new family built not from tradition or bloodlines, but from love, respect, and healing. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up when the world falls apart and helps you rebuild it, piece by piece. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.